What's going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 49 of the Hoop Venue podcast. My name is Tyler, and as always, I'm joined by my great friend Sean. The NBA Finals are here. We're 2 days away from the NBA Finals, man. I cannot wait. I kind of wanted to start this conversation and talk about how this is probably going to be, up to this point, the highest level of basketball ever played. I feel like that's not necessarily a hot take. If you watch both of these teams, we're talking about maybe the two most aggressive defenses ever in terms of ball pressure. Both of these teams are not afraid to send 3 or 4 guys into the backcourt to full court press an entire offense. Like, especially we saw it from the Pacers in Game 6 against the Knicks. They were sending their entire team into a full court press. If you squinted hard enough, you might have thought you were watching a high school game. So we're talking about two of the most aggressive defenses ever. We're talking about two of the fastest paced offenses in the league in an era that's all about pace. And they both do it incredibly efficiently. Neither team turns the ball over. We're looking at one of the best passers ever. We're looking at one of the best scorers ever. We're looking at one of the best defensive teams ever. We're looking at two of the most innovative and creative offensive coaches ever. I think that's where I want to start the conversation, Sean. We're looking at two of the highest level basketball teams ever, and this is going to be some, regardless of outcome, ridiculously high level basketball on both ends.
Yeah, I think both teams present immediate challenges to the other side, and it's gonna be really, really interesting to see, like, game one, where does the chess match kind of start at? It's very clear that, like, this series is gonna be one of the better finals we've gotten in a while, I think. At least heading into the series. In terms, like I said, the immediate chess match, the things that both teams do really, really well. Talking about two of the teams that are some of the best at taking care of the ball and pushing pace, like you mentioned. And they both do it so, like, uniquely different, rather, in terms of how they're going to push pace in transition. Indiana's going to do it with, I mean, we kind of talked about this before we got on, with, relative for era, one of the 3 fastest transition offenses ever is Showtime Lakers, like you mentioned, and then 7 seconds or less Suns, and then the Pacers. In terms of their ability to just get the ball out and run wide, but also, you know, be active cutters. Pascal Siakam got so many leak outs in Game 6 in particular of that Knicks series. Yeah, it's really, really interesting. And I'm curious, where do you want to kind of, like, from team perspective, where do we want to start at? But I do think that is a great point to kind of start off the conversation.
Yeah, I think we should start off with, I've said for a few days now, some people saw my YouTube short. I've got a long form video coming out on this topic, and I really do think there's so many nuances that go into this series in terms of how each team's going to attack the other team in ball screen action, how they're going to defend each other, what the lineups are going to look like is iHeart going to start, all this interesting stuff. And I really think this series is going to boil down to 2 categories. It's going to be who wins the transition battle and by how much, and who wins the turnover battle and by how much. And I think we should start with transition, because these are 2 teams that, to reference a tweet from our good friend Carson from Nerd Sesh, since synergy tracking began in 2005, every single team with at least an 8-point per game transition margin in the playoffs, which means they outscored their opponent by 8 points per game in transition. You've got the 2006 Suns, the 2007 Suns, then a huge gap, the 19 Bucks, the 21 Bucks, the 22 Bucks, and then the 25 Pacers and the 25 Thunder. So we're talking about 2 teams which, between transition offense and defense, are at the level of the peak Bucks with Giannis and the peak Suns with Nash. So yeah, let's talk about that. Let's start with the Pacers' transition offense. How do you think they can attack OKC's transition defense and vice versa?
I think the Pacers, what they do, even when you kind of stop the leak outs and try to get them slow down off their outlet passes and things of that nature. I think the thing with the Pacers that might be an interesting recall to an OKC defense that has faced good transition offenses. Like, the Nuggets were a really efficient transition offense. If I recall correctly, they were a top, like, 7 regular season transition offense.
Yeah.
But the Pacers, okay, cool. If you stop that initial wave of early offense, the Pacers they're going to run, and we were having another off-air conversation about like, are the Pacers kind of not being fully done justice in the sense of they run so many actions, or they can run action so ridiculously fast in early offense, and it might not be calculated as transition, even though it kind of still is. Where
Well, I want to reference an exact play. Like the
yeah,
Pacers Knicks, I think it was game 4. There was a play where Halliburton comes up on the left side of the court. I would pull this up on the screen, but I don't got it available. Runs up on the left side of the court. They go double drag. There's like 20 seconds on the shot clock. The Knicks completely bottle up the double drag, and not even half a second after the action fizzles out, they immediately set up an empty corner ball screen between Halliburton and Turner. Mitchell Robinson switches onto Halliburton, and then it's an isolation 3. And it's like, that's technically transition. Like, they created the initial advantage. They ran double drag, then ran an empty corner ball screen, and that's not going to be classified as transition scoring, but it all happened within like 7 seconds of the shot clock. And I just wanted to reference an example of what you're talking about.
yeah, absolutely. So I think it wouldn't surprise me, given how well coached, and just how good, honestly, defensively the Thunder are. I don't think the Pacers are going to get the level of leak outs and early hit aheads and transition that they got against the Knicks. It was just absurd how they were abusing the Knicks in transition. I think the Pacers version of transition in this series is still trying to get some of those hit aheads, but I think it's going to come more so from, in this series, it's going to come more so from, let's get it to our actions and our multiple actions. And they do a great job of flowing from action to action, like you were just saying. I think it's going to be more so that, and making the Thunder have to guard as much as possible in the span of 10 seconds. And then, okay, cool, Thunder do a great job. I mean, they're Thunder, so I would have put it past them. Now we still have half the shot clock to operate with and still try to get a quality shot with Halliburton. So I think that's kind of how Indiana tries to attack in transition in this series. But at the same time, like, they just play so fast off the inbound that what I'm saying could just be completely false, and they could still, especially early on in the series, still beat OKC over the top.
Well, I think there's some merit to what you're saying on the other end, where you're saying they could get a lot of that taken away. Because if you remember Memphis this season, that was their entire offense. It was every made shot, every missed shot, every turnover. We're running and gunning. We're kicking the ball ahead. And then it was like, okay, if a team is completely set, they get back, then we're going to play one-on-one. Like, we're going to have this 5-out spacing, or maybe a 4-out 1-in with Zach Edey on the court. Yeah. And we're going to just do early isolation, drive and kick, drive and kick, drive and kick. So it was a little bit different, but they were still looking for the same types of leak outs, early drives, and all those things. It was just less action. And OKC completely bottled up their transition offense in the first round. Memphis went from transition accounting for 17.2% of their plays in the regular season, which ranked second, to 11.9% in the playoffs, which would have ranked 29th. Mm-hmm. So we're talking about just a complete shift. And OKC's entire thing was, we're going to accept every cross match. Whoever's in the position to pick up the ball is just going to pick up the ball. So you'd end up with like Hartenstein on Ja Morant and these really weird looks. And it was like, okay, every cross match, we do not care. We're going to have this guy on the ball. And then they were just going to send the low man, because Memphis didn't really have the type of shooting where you have to panic about, we need every shooter covered. It would be like, okay, if Konchar's going to get this 3 off, or if Jaren Jackson's going to get this 3 off, or maybe Ja Morant's in the corner, like, okay, we'll live with that guy shooting. So they could accept every cross match and then send the low man to the paint. And that's how they completely bottle up Memphis's transition offense, and that's how they bottled up those early isolations. I think they can do the same thing against Indiana. They can cross match everything, get back. The difference is, if you send the low man, Indiana's going to hit that corner shooter, and they've made 47% of their corner threes in the playoffs. And I talked about this in my preview video. It's not just one guy driving up the percentage. If you look across the board in the playoffs, they only have one player in their top 9 shooting below 42% on corner threes, and it's Ben Shepherd. You've got like Mathurin making 43%, McConnell's making 50%, Siakam's 50%, Turner 60%. Like, these guys aren't missing corner threes. So that's one difference. The other difference is what you talked about. They're going to get into 5-6 actions like it's nothing. And you can't just cross-match everything in your normal lineups, because here's the thing, and it comes back to the Hartenstein conversation. Like in the Memphis series, if Hartenstein picked up Ja Morant would immediately get into an isolation. And it's like, cool, that's an advantage. But if Chet's coming over from the weak side, where's the advantage? Because John Morant's looking to get to the rim. In this Indiana series, it's okay, Hartenstein's on Halliburton. Now let's put him in 2 screens, or let's make him chase Halliburton, or they can do all these weird things that just completely warp the geometry of the court and make it almost impossible to cross-match everyone. So I think the conversation comes back to, you got to start Chet at the 5 in this series if you're OKC.
Yes.
Have to.
If OKC starts with Ihart and Chet, like, it wouldn't surprise me if game 1 Indiana just came out on fire.
They're just going to shoot themselves in the foot. Like, I fully, and the worst part is I fully expect them to start with Hartenstein.
Yeah.
Like, they've shown no wiggle room on that at all. And it's like, I don't know why that lineup really hasn't been that good in the regular season or the playoffs, but it is what it is. I guess, like, get your worst lineup out of the way early and then climb out. I don't really know what it is, but it wouldn't surprise me, and that actually bothers me even more specifically in this series, not just because of the transition thing. That's the big thing. But also, who's he guarding in the half court? Because you can't really put him on Siakam. You definitely can't put him on Miles Turner. We saw how that went in the second round last year. Turner absolutely lit him up in that Knicks series in the pick and pop. So it's like, yeah, I don't know. Let's assume they start with Hartenstein, which I kind of expect them to do. I don't think they should. Let's assume they do. Who do you put him on, and then what type of coverage are you running?
I think I wouldn't start him.
But you say you have to. You're forced to by the league. Adam Silver makes the call. Start Hartenstein.
I probably just put him on. You probably put him on Miles, but there's an automatic problem here. There's 2 problems. Although I was gonna say maybe we do a hedge and try to get back, but and try to play it to the fact that we're an elite rotating defense, but Halliburton's a perfect playmaker almost. Because then your other 2 options are we're just gonna switch, and I think Halliburton's just gonna get around Hartenstein. Indiana can also get really creative with their offensive concepts that they know that Ihart's going to switch, and then the second option is obviously drop, and that's not a viable option because Hallie, we saw in the fourth quarter of Game 6 against the Knicks when the Knicks went back to drop. That's when Hallie just went nuts, and then Miles Turner on to pick a pop 3. Halliburton's an elite playmaker, so if you try to tag and have an X out on the back end, Halliburton's going to read that perfectly almost every single time. So there isn't a good answer with starting Ihart, I think. So I think you just go with Chet at the 5. Do you start Kaysen or Caruso?
I would probably start Kaysen.
I agree.
I like Caruso as just unleashing him off the bench.
Yeah.
I just love that. And I think Kaysen in these playoffs has progressed so much as an offensive player and connector.
Mm-hmm.
He has these 4, 5, 7 assist games that are
Game 2 against Minnesota, he had 7 assists, or was that game 1?
Yeah, he's the type of guy I want in that starting unit. And I that's not necessarily saying he's the better or more valuable player than Caruso. It's just specifically his fit with the starting 5. I like a little bit more on offense. But also the idea of just getting Caruso off the bench as just this chess piece that you just put him on the board, and it's a wrecking ball. One other coverage I had in mind for the pick and pop specifically is, or I guess pick and roll too, specifically the pick and pop for now. Ihart and drop, and this is what they did against Jaren Jackson. Ihart and drop, and then you just shift everyone one pass over. So the closest help defender is going to rotate to the pop, and then once everything fills out, Ihart ends up in the corner. And I think that kind of works in terms of taking away the initial advantage, but we've talked about that action is probably happening 18 or 19 seconds into the shot clock. So now the Pacers probably have they can manipulate the court in some way. Let's say they put Nembhard in that corner. Mm-hmm. Now you have Hartenstein on Nembhard. And then it's okay, now we have 16 seconds to exploit that mismatch.
Right.
Or also, Turner could end up with a guard on it. What if Isaiah Joe's the guy rotating over to Turner? Or what if you end up with Isaiah Joe and Siakam? There's so much that could go wrong with the switching. But also, there's and this is where the pick and roll comes into it. Ihart isn't a great drop defender. He just isn't. He's way better as a hedge defender. than he is as a drop defender. Like, I think that's the coverage you go with if you're Chet Holmgren, because Chet's one of the best drop defenders in the league. He's going to take away the ball. He can recover to the pop if needed, or he can fill out space and then you get him on the baseline. And I'm not worried about Chet on Nembhard or Chet on Nesmith or Chet on Siakam or whoever. He can guard those guys. So I think that is where you run into the issue again of like, if iHeart's on Turner, there really isn't a good option. And then it's like, if you put him on Nesmith, now it's ghost screens. Now it's all that good stuff that they love to do to make centers chase. Same thing with Siakam, or it's an isolation, and you've got him on Siakam. So I think in terms of their half-court offense, half-court defense and transition defense, they are just completely capping their ceiling anytime iHeart's on the court with Chet. I think this is a specialized series for iHeart, where you get Chet on the floor for 35, 36 minutes, whatever it is. And then all of those other minutes, sure, go with iHeart at the 5. If iHeart's at the 5 and they're running Tony Bradley or Thomas Bryant, I feel that is a huge advantage. I feel great about that. But if it's iHeart at the 5 against Miles Turner, or if it's iHeart and Chet in the front court against Miles Turner, don't love it. Don't love it.
Flipping the sides really quickly, how do you think Indiana slows down OKC in transition? And when it does get into that, I mean, Shai is one of the best transition scorers of all time, and then you get to the half court, and now you have the best middle of the floor operator, best perimeter middle of the floor operator in the entire league.
Yeah, so for me, I think their transition offense is a little bit more inevitable in a different way. Like, I think Indiana's the better transition offense, but OKC is more inevitable in that, first of all, the only way to stop half of their transition opportunities is to not turn the ball over, which is something else we'll talk about. Because once they start forcing 14, 15, 16 turnovers in a game, it gets bad. Like, that's when you know they're just going to be running. Like, they blew second quarter of Game 7 against Denver, just blow the game wide open with like 4 turnovers in a row. Throughout the series against Minnesota, we saw the same thing in that Game 5 also, just blew the game wide open, forcing turnovers and getting out and running. So that side of it, the only way to avoid it is to not turn the ball over, which if there's an offense that can do that, it's Indiana. The other side of it, though, is their normal transition offense off of made shots or missed shots or whatever is just early isolation. And I don't really think there's anything you can do about that except for make sure your defense is perfectly set. So get back, don't crash the offensive glass. Make sure our defense is completely set. And then also make sure either Nesmith or Nembhard is always in position to pick up Shai. Because as soon as there's some kind of cross match, you get Siakam on Shai or Halliburton on Shai or TJ McConnell on Shai, literally anyone but Nembhard or Nesmith, good luck. Good luck stopping Shai.
Yeah.
And that starts with their ball pressure. Like, Nembhard or Nesmith needs to be on Shai like a shadow all 48 minutes.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, like, I think I don't know who's going to win the transition battle. That's what makes this so fascinating. I don't know.
I think, yeah.
Like, who wins that battle? Because both have interesting ways of maybe slowing down the other team, but they also feel inevitable. Like you said, Indiana could just end up getting all those leakouts, or they could end up killing OKC with all these early actions. In the same way that Shai could just kill Indiana by getting a cross match, or even just getting Nesmith or Nembhard, because there's no one in the league who can really guard Shai one-on-one. So anytime your
48
defense,
minutes over a 7-game series.
right? Like anytime your defense isn't perfectly set, and we saw Shai really exploit that against Denver. Anytime he could get against Denver with an unset defense, it was just automatic paint touch. It was paint city. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know who do you think is gonna win the transition battle in this series? Offense and defense. Like, who's gonna outscore their opponent in transition?
I very, 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 very narrowly give the edge to OKC. And part of it is because, kind of like you said, their transition offense in a sense, in a sense, both teams are kind of inevitable in terms of the transition offense. I think to a certain extent, OKC's is a little bit more inevitable from the sense of, like, you can't scheme for it. Where to a certain extent, it has not been done successfully. So I'm not like trying to discredit Indiana's, but to a certain extent, you can prepare and try to scheme for what Indiana does in terms of their early flow actions or in terms of their hit-aheads and stuff like that. But really, OKC, it's like kind of specifically with Shai, there's just gonna be like possessions where you are unset. There's no chance you're gonna be having a set defense every single time, because if that was possible, then please somebody like forward me the information. I'll be freaking fantastic. Which, going back to your point about having Shai against an unset defense, it's 2 points pretty automatically. And then Indiana's one of the best teams in the league at taking care of the ball. But like at the same time, OKC's one of the best teams ever at forcing turnovers. So the best team ever at forcing turnovers. So okay, Indiana, they'll probably still be fine, relatively speaking, but like OKC is still going to force turnovers to a certain extent. So I think there's just certain elements of it that are a little bit more like scheme worthy, or not even scheme worthy, but like you just can't scheme for some of that stuff. And then also I just put a ton of value in how elite OKC's transition defense has been all year. But again, at the same time, it's still really, really close, and that's just because Indiana's insanely elite at all the stuff we've already talked about. But I personally slightly lean OKC. What about you?
So just before I get into my take, I want to throw a couple numbers at you. So far over the entire playoffs, the Pacers have outscored their opponents in transition by 8.5 points per game, while the Thunder have outscored their opponents by 8.1 points per game. In a specific series, the most dominant transition scoring series have been the Pacers in the Eastern Conference Finals against the Knicks.
Knicks
outscored the Knicks by 13.3 points per game. Then you get OKC in round 2 against Denver, plus 12.7. Then you get OKC in round 1 against Memphis, plus 7.8. Then you get Indiana against Milwaukee, plus 6.8. So the top 4 series the top 4 most dominant transition scoring series have been 2 from Indiana and 2 from OKC. The 5th most dominant transition series has been Golden State over Houston, plus 4.9. And then you get into Pacers round 2, and then a couple more series, you get to OKC in the Western Conference Finals. So these are 2 teams that have completely dominated the transition game in the playoffs. In the regular season, OKC was 3rd in the transition battle at plus 5.8. Indiana was 6th at plus 3.5. So all season long, all playoffs long, 2 of the best teams in terms of dominating the transition battle on both offense and defense. My personal take, I agree with everything you said about the scheming and the inevitability of Shai. I would give the very slight edge to Indiana just because of something you said off air. There's just more of an emphasis on every single opportunity we're going to try and speed the game up. So it's like, even after dead balls, you'll see an immediate kick ahead. And it's just those subtle differences in terms of the amount of offense they're trying to look for in transition in comparison to OKC. Like, OKC's shown that if they want to, they will slow the game down. Indiana's never, ever at one point been like, okay, let's slow this thing down and get more methodical. Like, Shake might slow the game down and get more methodical with his isolation play, or J-Dub. Whereas Indiana's like, go, nonstop. And I think that would be where I give them a very slight edge.
Yeah, that's totally fair. Like, the one might be more inevitable in a sense, whereas like the other one is just okay, cool. I don't even necessarily have to be inevitable. I'm gonna do this regardless. Like, yeah, I get that.
Let's assume Indiana does slow down a lot in this series. We both agree that most of their offense is going to be those ball screens, like high ball screens, early ball screens, especially if Hartenstein's on the court. We've talked about what Hartenstein and Chet can do coverage-wise, because neither of them you really want switching. Although Chet probably can switch if that's like a last resort type thing. I've got 2 more things I kind of want to ask you about Indiana's offense. One, how do you feel about Siakam in this series? Because in New York, a lot of it was, I got this cross match, I'm going to abuse this cross match, whether it's Bridges, whether it's Hart, Brunson. Like, if you got a cross match, it was food. But, like, also, he was kind of cooking OG. as well. And I don't like if you made a defender in a lab to guard Siakam, I feel like OG would be pretty close to what comes out of that. So like I assume they start J-Dub on him, but then it's like, does it really matter? Like, is Siakam still going to get his efficient 20? How do you feel about Siakam?
I feel pretty good about Siakam. And I think what makes me feel good about Siakam is just how versatile of an offensive chess piece he is. You can go inverted pick and roll with Siakam. He's still going to get his post touches either at the elbow or slash mid post or the low post in general. Elite transition weapon, and we've seen that all playoffs long. Active cutter. I feel good solely off of that. Like, okay, let's say OKC is able to eliminate his isolations or the transition leakouts that we talked about, like against the Knicks. The Pacers basically have everything else in their to their disposal in terms of how to get Siakam going. And to that point, Siakam's easily the most versatile offensive player they have on the roster. In terms of scoring the ball wise,
for sure.
He's easily more of an versatile scorer compared to Nembhard or Hallie or any of the other guys they have. So I feel good. I feel good about Siakam, especially like if OKC was to come out and switch. Then I could very see them go again like the inverted stuff with Siakam or try the cross matches, the transition we talked about. Very much expect them to attempt to get Siakam going against like a Case and Wallace in early offense or some stuff like that. So I feel really, really good about Siakam actually heading into the series. I think this is pretty good for him actually. Our attacking
That's
Chet.
really fair. And I think one point that you really hit on was the inverted ball screen point, because I think we're both in agreement that OKC is going to switch literally everything between their wings.
Yeah.
Whether it's Caruso, Shea, J-Tub, like they're going to switch probably everything. And so if you can get like Shea on Siakam consistently or Kaysen on Siakam consistently, it's not that those guys can't defend up. It's just that is still a mismatch. Like Siakam will absolutely take that as a mismatch and play out of the mid post. So I do think J-Dub can do some interesting things against Siakam. I also think Caruso will spend a lot of time on Siakam, and Dort even will spend a lot of time on Siakam. And they can all probably push him out, but none of them can really get up on that turnaround jumper. Like, he's not looking to throw someone into the baseline and body them. He's looking to get to that turnaround jumper from like 6 to 8 feet. And nobody on the team can really contest that. So I feel good about that. But then also, they're going to switch everything. So if you get those smaller guys on Siakam, those smaller wings, even though they are still elite defenders, that is still a mismatch for a guy like Siakam, so I do feel good about that. The other question that I had for you was, or I guess I actually have a couple more, OKC's gap defense, and the way they like to aggressively send the low man to the paint against dribble drives or even post-ups or literally any action. How do you view the battle between OKC's aggressive help and Indiana's corner threes?
Yeah. OKC's defense is obviously one of the, we talked about this on the last pod. We both had it, respectively, one of the three best defenses of the century, basically, whether it's 2, 3, or 4. I think the lowest we had was 3, I think.
I think I had 3, you had them 2.
Okay. And part of what makes them so elite is kind of what you said, the gap defense, how they're going to rotate over aggressively, how they're going to scramble out and play perfectly with the rotations and their activity in the passing lanes. And having this conversation actually makes me think about the series a little bit differently. Because the one team, I actually somewhat trust OKC to like rotate perfectly as always and be there on the catch. The one team that is probably outside of maybe Boston, and even then, I think Indiana might have Boston beat. I think the Indiana Pacers are the best team in the league at playing off the catch. There's not a single team in the league that consistently plays off the catch better than the Indiana Pacers, to the point where, okay, OKC rotate, they stop the dribble drive early, and the ball gets skipped out, and OKC's there on the catch. Okay, Neesmith's a great decision maker off the catch. Nembhard's an elite decision maker off the catch. Siakam, if it's a cross match,
Turner might be the best off the catch big in the league.
Turner's an elite off the catch big, like you mentioned. If McConnell's in, like they have so many guys that are just elite processors off the catch, to the point where I think that is going to be the thing. It's not necessarily going to be the corner threes. I don't think it's going to be that. I think it's going to be the fact that OKC is just going to be in rotation for all 24 seconds, because Indiana is just going to consistently make high level decisions off the catch. And there might be a night where the shots aren't necessarily falling for Indiana, but over the course of a 7-game series for the Pacers offense, I think process wise, you got to feel good about that. Having 5 elite decision makers at their position off the catch at all times, and then God forbid the ball gets skipped back out to a Halliburton or a Siakam with an advantage. Like, Aaron Nesmith is like, he shot so far in the playoffs over 50% on above the break threes. We talked about the corner 3-point shooting. I think technically Halliburton's the weakest 3-point shooter in the playoffs out of the bunch, which is absurd. Nembhard doesn't miss in the playoffs, second straight year in a row. We've already talked about, and because of the rotating, now you're more susceptible to cross matches, and that's where we talk about like Siakam and where he could be dangerous at. So that's actually gonna be the interesting part. I'm curious if like OKC eventually just goes, okay, cool, you know what? We're not gonna do that. We're just gonna switch everything and just kind of like Indiana to the sense where you just gotta play consistently 1-on-1, and we're not gonna send the extra help. We're not gonna do any of that stuff. We might send like our goalie and let Chet kind of try to operate at the rim, but in terms of the aggressive loading over, I think early in the series, Indiana could potentially burn OKC.
So that was where I was headed with my last question. I'm glad that was such a perfect transition for me. My next question was kind of a 2-for-1. My first part of my question, it's gonna happen at some point in this series. So we've got Game 7 against the Nuggets. They put Caruso on Jokic, unlocks, like, switch everything, front the post, super aggressive. Game 4, fourth quarter against Minnesota, Caruso on Gobert. Same thing. Switch everything, take away Ant's pull-up 3, force them to use McDaniels as a screener. And then in Game 5, again, Caruso on Gobert, aggressive switching, forced a couple turnovers on Randall and Ant doing that. At some point in the series, we're going to see Caruso on Miles Turner. And it might not be Caruso, it might be J-Dub, it might be whoever. We're going to see a wing on Miles Turner, and we are going to see them switch literally everything across the board. And that would mean pre-switching to keep Chet on the baseline, which they've shown they love to do throughout these entire playoffs. What do you think Indiana could do to attack that? If it's like Caruso on Turner, switch everything, Chet's always on the baseline, what do you think they can do?
Switch everything, Caruso on Turner. Okay, I'm probably going floor positioning. Why do I have like my board? I don't.
I feel like Turner would be in the corner if that's the case.
Maybe I'm bugging. I was like low-key gonna put Turner in the slot.
I don't want Caruso at the nail. I do not want that guy at the nail.
Okay. Let's operate with Turner in the corner. It's like, okay, if OKC's at 5L, let's just like envision balls on like the right wing, right slot. So we're in 5L, assuming for Indiana, right? So corner, slot, top. Fair? Yep. And Chet is on the baseline, so is he guarding, like he's guarding that like far?
Well, so the way you just framed it right there does our job for us. Like Chet is in the strong side corner. If Halliburton's on the right wing, Turner's in the weak side in corner. You either have to pre-switch that early so that Chet's in the weak side, because if Chet's in the strong side corner with the ball in the wing, then you can just put Chet in the action, and that's the guy they don't want to switch.
And then if we brought Turner into the action, try to pre-switch that, then I'm just sending Turner out of there. So basically we're gonna overload the right side of the floor. And then we're just going to go into double drag, because now we're keeping Chet. So, like, okay, in this envision now, it's corner. We're kind of like bunching up that right corner, and it's still Halliburton and like the right wing and top and left slot area filled or whatever, or left corner.
Yeah.
You go double drag because you pre-switched that first action. So it's now it's Caruso on Miles Turner in this example, kind of, sticking with that and wanting to pre-switch and keep Chet on the baseline. okay, cool. Now we go double drag, or they love their this skip action where it looks like double drag, and the first screener set to Halliburton sprints off, throws it to the second screener and sprints it to a DHO. Going to that against an empty corner with like Chet retreat. I mean, it's still Chet, but at the same time, like process wise, you still feel good about that if you're Indiana.
Agreed. And I will say, like, Indiana to me is the best team in the league at attacking pre-switching. Like, they know how to force everyone into the action. New York tried to like keep Cat, Robinson, Brunson out of the action at different points in the series. We saw it with Boston a little bit last year. Like, Indiana's the best in the league at forcing whoever they want into the action. So I do agree with you there that they would find ways to involve Chet and they'd find ways to manipulate the court and get what they want. Now from the second part of my question, because this feels like the type of series where OKC can very easily go small. So how often, I guess my question would be like, how many, at what point in the series do we see a J-Dub at the 5 lineup, and how often do you think they run it from there on? Because like, if you wouldn't want to lean into this switch everything, let's go Shai, Wallace, Dort, Caruso, J-Dub. Good luck.
Game 5. 2-2 going back to OKC. Game 5. Indiana rolls out, not off the bat, but like heavy, like 15 minutes of just like no iHeart at all. iHeart's getting torched and dropped the entire series. And Game 5, it's Chet, and then our backup 5 is Jalen Williams. J-Dub, not other Jalen Williams. And then this kind of plays in perfectly, I think, to like what I was kind of saying earlier. And there's going to be a game like early or throughout the series where OKC still just creates all those turnovers and things like that. Again, they're the best defense of all time at creating turnovers. But like, I think that might be the wave at some point.
And also, to that point, like, this kind of goes back to what I said about the turnover differential being one of the biggest factors in this series. If you go with this model of we're going to switch everything and we're going to make you play one-on-one, I do think that gives Indiana an advantage in the turnover department. Because if you're running your offense through Halliburton and Siakam one-on-one, you're never going to turn the ball over.
Yeah.
Like, neither of those guys ever turn the ball over. All of their turnovers come in, like, when they're attacking a rotation. Like, they don't lose the ball.
So, OKC goes small Game 5. What's your counter if you're Indiana? Do you play into that, go smaller, and go Siakam at the 5, or what are we thinking?
I think I'm sticking with my normal 5, and I'm just, like, trying to get the smallest guys on Siakam and Turner and doing, like, low post seals.
Yeah. I feel you.
That's what I'm looking for personally, because like we talked about, Turner and Siakam, I don't have the numbers pulled up in front of me, but throughout the postseason, they've been like 2 of the top 5 most efficient post scorers. So it's like, if that's what you're giving us, I think Indiana's really good at just taking what the defense gives them. They don't try to force anything. It's like, okay, you're gonna go small. Now we're gonna look for that mismatch. That's what we're gonna do. Like, and like I said, those wings can all pretty much switch. But if you end up with Kaysen or Shai on Siakam or Kaysen on Turner, that's a mismatch that you can probably like take advantage of with your ability to space and move the ball. So yeah, that's where I would look.
Pascal Siakam, 81st percentile post up score in terms of efficiency, or in terms of scoring possessions, 1.03 points per possession in the playoffs. Does not turn the ball over. 3% turnover rate on post ups. Miles Turner, 76th percentile post-up scorer, 1 point per possession on his post-ups. And then if you sometimes the Synergy will classify like those like nail post-ups as isolations. So Siakam, a little bit less efficient, well, a lot of bit less efficient isolation score per Synergy, 0.85 points per possession on isolations. But Halliburton, elite ISO scorer, 84th percentile, 1.13 points per possession on ISOs in the playoffs.
Yeah. So I do think I'll land on there for my side of things. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to talk about with OKC's defense and Indiana's offense, but I do want to clarify, like, the reason we're spending so much time on this is because we're probably both in agreement that this is the dynamic that's going to decide the series. Like more than just the transition and turnover thing. Like whoever wins the battle between Indiana's offense and OKC's defense is probably going to win the series.
Yeah.
But on the other side of things, there's this guy named Shai Gilgeous-Alexander who Indiana's going to have to try to guard. And I just want to ask you, what are you doing if you're Indiana to guard this guy? Because they've struggled with Giannis individually. They've struggled with Giannis, Mitchell, and Brunson all now. Like Brunson in the conference finals was 31 points a game on 63% true shooting.
Yikes.
So it's like, what do you do with Shai?
So there, I'm honestly, you still do it because I think it's you lean into still what's a special part of your defense, which is the ball pressure. We talked about that. Admittedly, though, the ball pressure still it kind of scares me still because Shai's so crafty and so like this is gonna sound weird, but I think it'll make sense. He's like so slimy in terms of his movements as a like on ball player, to where I think it's very much a realistic outcome where the ball pressure kind of works against Indiana. Shai just gets around him with his craftiness, his movements, unorthodox movements, and now Nembhard's in foul trouble. Now Neesmith's in foul trouble. Now we're going into our bench. Now we're getting Benedict Mather and TJ McConnell extra minutes, and now we're just cooked.
Yeah.
So part of me almost wants to say, do we just pick up like at half with the elite ball pressure? And I'm not letting Shai beat us in early offense, like okay, inbound and we're full court pressing, and now Shai is beating us 70 feet away from the basket, essentially. Where pick them up at half, we can still have our ball pressure, and we kind of rock out like that. So that's kind of the first thing that comes to my mind. I wouldn't be surprised, and I would probably still do it game one if Indiana just comes out with their traditional like full court ball pressure and stuff like that. But that's just like a little like side note that potentially scares me. In terms of how they guard Shai in general, I think I'm very clearly early on testing the shooting of OKC pretty early.
Agreed. Agreed.
It's kind of the opposite of Indiana in the sense of like, all right, Kaysen, love you. AC, you're, special place in my heart. Dub, you've been hooping. Chet, you've been hooping. Can y'all like one more time? You know the can you give me one more day? Can you do this one more time? And I'm honestly testing that because I don't really think and we've seen this from last year and this year against some of the most aggressive defenses we have arguably seen ever in terms of in terms of on-court tactics. And I had to specify that because some people get in their feelings when we say that, and oh man, it's not as tough and physical as the good old days. Well, tactically, it's just one of the most aggressive defenses we've ever seen. In terms of what Shai saw, whether it's round 2, whether it's even a little bit against Minnesota, it just doesn't matter. So again, last time I hopefully will ever have to say this, I don't want to hear ever again that Shai does not translate to the playoffs. Okay, it doesn't matter. Some of the most aggressive defenses ever, still gets his free throws off, still gets his 30 on like 60% true shooting. It doesn't matter. Very clearly, the way that OKC is in these dogfights or battles or loses in a series, if you go back to Dallas last year or you go to the Denver series this year, which goes 7 games, it's literally one of two ways, literally. And even the Denver series this year kind of fell into both categories. Either A, the secondary creators / shooters for OKC don't really show up and they kind of get outgunned by the opposing team's secondary creators, the secondary role players, i.e. Dallas. Or 2, that team just has the best player on the planet. And to be honest, like Denver kind of falls into both categories. It's just that this OKC defense is so elite and they got enough, barely enough. But that series goes 7 because you have a lot of inconsistent games from J-Dub and some inconsistent games from Chet and some of the shooters, and then they have Jokic. So and then the other series, New Orleans last year, Memphis this year, Minnesota for the most part, like actually at Minnesota entirely, like Dub and Chet and the other guys were fantastic.
Yeah.
So that's very clearly where I'm starting this. I'm saying off jump, can you do it one more time? And if you do it, congratulations. But because to a certain extent, it's almost like there's no stopping Shai. Like Shai's the definition of he's the I am inevitable meme. That's Shai.
No, I agree. I think there are some things you can point to, like to your ball pressure point. It kind of works against what I would want to do against Shai in ball screen situations. Like I probably want Nesmith or Nembhard ducking under, and it's like see if you can bait Shai into taking 7 or 8 threes because that's
kind of like New York with Cade. Like very weird series to go to, but kind of that.
They did it against Tatum and Brown too.
Yeah.
The hedge and then the go under.
Yeah.
I do like that model a little bit. And that allows you to keep Nesmith and Nembhard on Shai because I think I talked about this earlier. One of those two guys always has to be on Shai. Do not give up any switches. Do not let him get anybody but those two.
Mm-hmm.
They need to be on him like a shadow. But also I really like what you said about J-Dub and Chet getting going because that kind of determines this team's ceiling. Whenever those guys aren't going, they look beatable. Like Denver. J-Dub had a rough series against Denver, and the Thunder looked very beatable. That was a 7-game series. But then you get a series like Minnesota where J-Dub and Chet both have it going for the most part, and they look like the best team in NBA history, flat out. They look like they can beat anyone in 5 games. Because when their defense gives them such a high floor, then Shai gives them that offensive floor. So when they get those two other guys pushing the ceiling, this team hits a level that arguably no other team has ever reached. So to me, Indiana's defense has to be about, okay, Shai's going to do what he does.
Yeah.
How can we limit J-Dub and Chet? How can we not let those guys join the party? Because as soon as they do, you're not winning the series. Mm-hmm. It's just that simple. So I think one of the keys I talked about in my video was don't help off of J-Dub. Like you said, make the shooters prove it. If the floor is set up where Shai's at the top of the key, let's say J-Dub's on the left wing, I'm not bringing any help from J-Dub. I'm just going to have my guy stay on J-Dub. Do not give him advantages. Don't let him attack a tilted defense. Instead, I'm like, probably just sending the low man to the middle of the floor, kind of like what they did with Jokic. Mm-hmm. Sitting him at the free throw line and saying, look, Shai, if you want to hit that corner, we'll let that guy make that 3. Mm-hmm. We will make him hit that 3. As opposed to J-Dub or Chet attacking a tilted defense, getting paint touches, drawing fouls, J-Dub getting to his mid-range game. I think that's where they start the series. Now, if OKC proves that they can hit those threes, then it becomes a different story. Now we have to get back to the drawing board and see what happens. But throughout these playoffs, OKC's only made 34% of their catch-and-shoot threes. And the only 2 guys above 35% are Isaiah Joe at 36% and Caruso at 42%. So shout out to Caruso, by the way. But, like, J-Dub, Chet, Dort, Kaysen, they've all made like 33 to 34% of their catch-and-shoot threes. Shai's only 1 for 10 on catch-and-shoot threes in the playoffs. So it's like, that's where I'm starting. I'm making OKC prove that they can beat me from the three-point line, and then I'm going from there.
Yeah.
That's what it is. Like, Shai's honestly, like, it sounds crazy, but if Shai averages 31 points a game on 63% true shooting like Brunson did, I'm viewing that as a small win. I'm being like, hey, man, we held Shai to what Brunson did.
Yeah.
Cool.
Cool beans.
Don't let J-Dub score 22. Don't let J-Dub and Chet combine for 40 efficient points.
Yeah.
That's the goal.
Yeah. So I think to a certain extent we're agreeing. Maybe we just worded it differently, but like I didn't disagree with what you said.
No, we agree. Yeah, we totally agree. Like you got to limit J-Dub and Chet. You cannot let them get going.
Yeah.
Obviously you don't want Shai just erupting for an efficient 40, but it's like I think
shrug.
You need to send help. Yeah, send help from the shooters. Get back in transition. That's the main thing. Because like I said, at the end of the day, I think this series boils down to transition and turnover battle. I said I think Indiana has a very slight advantage in the transition department. I think OKC has a pretty clear advantage in the turnover department because what we talked about, both of these teams take such good care of the ball. But OKC is the best ever at forcing those turnovers.
Yeah.
So regardless of how you're doing if you're switching everything and making them play one-on-one, whatever you're doing, you're going to find ways to force turnovers. So that's kind of where this series ends up for me. I think Indiana, I think the series comes down to those 2 categories. I think Indiana has a slight advantage in transition. I think OKC has a clear advantage in the turnovers. That makes me lean towards OKC overall.
OKC, how many games?
6 is my pick. I think 6.
I am also going to say OKC in 6. If you asked me like legit 15 minutes ago, I almost said OKC in 7. And maybe that's because we spent so much time talking about the Pacers and their advantages. That I was like, oh man, hey, hold on a minute, wait. No, I'm gonna lean OKC in 6, but I think it's gonna be a entertaining as hell 6 games. And very clearly could go 7, or Indiana can even win still.
Here's the thing, though, where my head's at. Like, if it's 2-2, going back to Game 5, I think OKC. Obviously, also, we didn't even talk about, these have been the 2 hardest teams to beat on their home court.
Yeah.
Like, neither of these teams lose on their home court. So it's like, predicting OKC in 6 feels weird because I'm predicting OKC to eliminate the Pacers in Indiana, which, like, Indiana doesn't lose in Indiana.
Cop out, I'm going OKC in 7.
That's fair. That's kind of where my head just went because, okay, but if OKC goes up... It's such a weird thing because if OKC goes up 3-1, they're closing Game 5. They're winning in 5.
Yeah.
But then it's like, if it's 3-2, does Indiana lose on their home floor? So, like, it almost feels like it has to be OKC in 5 or 7. So I'm choosing 6 as the happy medium, but, like, I don't see it ending in Game 6.
Yeah.
I don't even know. I'm rolling with OKC in 6 because that's what my gut was, but... It's so weird. Also, I want to say this is a very winnable series for Indiana. Just because we're picking the games for OKC doesn't mean
very winnable
assuming
series.
OKC just wins the series. Indiana can win the series.
Yes, like legit was talking myself into it whenever I said something about this made me think about the series differently. Like legit was almost talking myself into picking Indiana.
Like here's one thing I want to say. Like I think a very realistic scenario is Indiana punches OKC in the mouth in Game 1. Like they start Hartenstein, Indiana blitzes them in the first quarter offensively. They win Game 1, and then they win both of the home court games. And now you're up 3-1 going back to OKC. Then you end up 3-2 with a chance to close in Indiana.
Yes,
very reasonable scenario.
And that was one of the reasons why I kind of talked about stuff. I'm like, dog, they're gonna start iHeart and they're gonna get blitzed. Watch.
I think a lot of people are writing off Indiana in the series. I haven't seen anyone say confidently that Indiana's going to blitz OKC. I've seen a lot of people say that OKC is going to blitz Indiana, and then I've seen a lot of people say it's going to be a close series. I haven't seen anyone that's like Indiana goes up 3-1 and then closes in 6, which I think is a very realistic scenario.
Now, mind you, and this is maybe just unnecessary Knicks hate. I had OKC in 5 against the Knicks. I did not see that being a great series.
I did too. No, I did. Yeah, I did too. Yeah. Easily. Yeah. I don't think the Knicks had a single advantage on OKC.
Brunson respect. There's where the one game comes from.
Right, from a basketball fan and an analyst perspective, I'm glad this is the matchup. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean,
but
Knicks Wolves would have been fun because of narratives,
and it would have been a good series.
It would have helped out your video of saying that it was a win-win trade.
Definitely would have helped. Yeah. Any last points on either of these teams or just the matchup in general?
Come join us on Playback Thursday.
Ooh, you're cooking.
Am I?
Playback.tv/hoopvenue. I will be live streaming every single finals game. I'm sure Sean will join me for some or most of them. Denver, of course, will be joining us as well if you're familiar with Double D Worth on YouTube.
I have to talk to more Warriors fans. I'm joking.
More Warriors fans, yep. You got to listen to Denver, talk about the Lakers and Wolves series. Shout out Denver. Yeah, we really appreciate you guys listening. Make sure to follow us on all of our social media platforms. If you're watching on YouTube, those will be in the description. Sean's on Twitter at Sean_DAVI and on Instagram at Sean_Davis23. My personal accounts are Tyler Britton. You can find our YouTube accounts. I'm on Hoop Venue. That's where all my main content, of course, is. And I'm on Hoop Venue on all social media platforms for more in-depth basketball content. Sean's on YouTube at the Los Angeles Lakers Network and the Sports Headline Show. Like I said, if you're watching on YouTube, all of those links will be in the description. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like, subscribe, and let us know down in the comments what you think is going to happen in the NBA Finals. And if you're on Spotify or Apple or whatever, we really appreciate a 5-star rating as well as a comment, again, letting us know what you think is going to happen. But once again, we really just appreciate you guys listening to, or watching, I guess, this episode of the podcast. And we will be catching you guys next time for a Game 1 breakdown.